What's up everybody, welcome to Balkan Moto. Today we're going to do part 3 of dealing with the carburetors. Let's check out what's wrong. As with any carburetor bike I've built so far, setting and forgetting it as far as the carburetors go is never the case. So I took it out for a ride, and even with adjusting the pilot screws to 3.5 turns out, that did correct some of the fueling issues down low. But there still is this like starvation that happens when you ride the bike. So it starts and idles perfectly fine without choke, without anything. Under wide open throttle, when it does work, it works beautifully. It pulls super hard. It will accelerate up to like 140, just no problem. However, in that mid-range, and especially after doing a left turn, it seems like it's almost like starving for fuel. And it takes a while for the carburetors to actually suck in more fuel and get things going. So the plan is to take them off and see what's going on, see if we can find the root cause and resolve issues. The other funny problem that I found when I went to get gas is something that's actually quite common for these bikes. That initially when I bought the motorcycle, it didn't seem to have experienced it, but now that I have the motorcycle, do you see anything missing? One of the screws is, and where could it be? Well, it's somewhere in the tank, so we're gonna have to fish that out and retighten these two and put some Loctite on them so that this doesn't happen. But before we do that, let's get the tank off the bike and we'll go from there. Tank is off, and after lifting it and shaking it around, I can definitely hear the screw rolling around in there. So let's see if we can see it and potentially fish it out. And we gotta wipe that fuel. Okay, well, let's get some light in here. Oh, can't see shit. Oh, there it is, right there. So let's get, can you guys see it? Yep, that's a screw. So let's use some of this copper wiring, or not copper wiring, just some of this wire with some magnets, and just fish it out. Okay, so here we go. That's going to be annoying. And boom, there we go. All right, screws out. Let's close this up, shake it around, see if there's anything else metal in there. All right, the two screws are back on, nice and tight. Some thread locker on them, so they shouldn't be going anywhere. Let's get this back on the tank and shake it around, see if anything else is rattling in there. Excellent, tank is now clean of anything metal in it. And it was actually funny because when I was running the bike, I could hear this like metal clinking under the tank, and I always thought it might be the valves, but it isn't. It was this stupid little screw just rattling around in the tank. So that's one problem solved. Now let's take a look at the carbs again and see what's going on in there. For that, what we're gonna do is take off this cap, take off the box with the blow-by hose, and we're gonna try to drain the flow bowls before we take off everything. We're gonna take off the filters to see what's happening in there, if there's anything blocking air again before we take them off. And if that's not the case, then we're gonna move on to taking the carburetors off and seeing what's going on inside. All right, took off the pod filters, and they haven't fallen apart, so it's not an airway blockage. The interesting thing is that there is some fuel in the bottom of the boot here, so like this area here, there's fuel there, which is interesting because that would imply that fuel is leaking, or rather we're getting too much fuel spraying out back this way, which a little shocking, but okay, nevertheless. So let's see if we can diagnose the problem from without taking them off. I think it might be something to do with these going up like that. That goes up fine. What about the other one? Slides up fine as well on this side. Well, I guess let's take them off and see what's going on inside. First, let's try to drain them. So we're gonna take off this right here, but what is the drain bolt? Oh. So on this side, we have a drain bolt, but on the other side, I don't see one. So that's interesting issue that we'll have to figure out. Okay, let's get them off. Okay, so I drained both carburetors. It was a little bit of a interesting way to do it. On the other side, the drain port and the screw that drains it are fairly straightforward. So you have you put a hose on this and you undo the screw. Straightforward. However, on the other side, I don't know if you can see it, but the screw is actually accessible from this end and the port is under it. So you gotta fish it on the other side and come back here. Either way, both float bowls had fuel in them. So I am getting fuel. Now, why am I not burning that fuel is then an interesting story. So before we pull off the carburetors, let's take a look at the spark plugs, because I think that's going to tell us a story there. If we have too much blackness on them, that means we're running way too rich. So it's a overfueling issue, which I doubt, because before we were having an overfueling issue because the airways were being blocked in the filters, but now we don't have that, so we are getting enough air. And if we see that the spark plugs are a little bit more on the burnt off white side, then that means we're running really lean. So we are having a fuel issue, and maybe what's happening is the float bowls are getting stuck closed and aren't refilling properly, so it just needs a little bit of more cleaning. Either way, let's check the spark plugs. All right, so this is the rear cylinder spark plug, and it's just covered in black stuff. So we're running pretty rich, I would say, which is interesting. If we're running pretty rich, that means our needles are probably set too high, which was something that I suspected before, so we might need to adjust that. Okay, either way, that's the rear spark plug. Let's pull the front and see how that looks. All right, carbs are off. We're going to dig into them in a bit. But first, something to show you. How we know we're definitely running rich? Well, there's a ton of fuel right here. Like, look at this. So we're flooding the cylinders with fuel on both sides. So definitely too much being put in. And given that the bike idles fine and accelerates really well, it's probably because the mid-range is just spewing way too much fuel in there. So let's take a look at what's going on inside. I suspect that the issue is with so see the needle and this little thing that supports it here. I think this thing is supposed to sit in there properly and not just lift up like that. Because it's not seating in there, I think it's letting in way too much fuel. But that's something to experiment with and try. All right, let's open them up, see what happens in there. All right, I opened up one side and everything looks fine. The flow bowl is not sticking. The little needle here is again fine. I took out the idle jet, that's not clogged. The main jet is definitely not clogged, and based on what we saw on the things, we're definitely getting fuel. So this I think is fine. I think our problem is with these guys and the needle setting. So these needle settings. So let's close this up. I'll check the other one as well. Flip them over and we might need to redo the needles. All right, after double checking everything, I've set up things properly, and the only thing that I can't find any information on that seems to be wrong is this little guy. So this is essentially a guide of some sort that sits in the carburetor so that the needle can go into it like so. Now I thought that this way would go up, which is the cup looking side, and then the dull side would go inside of the thing. My thought process being that this would help guide the needle. Now after measuring it, it seems like this side, the cup side, is slightly thicker than the other side. And what was happening is, if I had it this way, this thing would actually pull up and let fuel all around it, flooding the whole system. So my thinking is, I'm going to flip it and install it this way, reassemble everything, and see how the bike runs then. So let's try that. All right, after a few more iterations with the carburetors, I finally figured it out. So I found a service manual for the V-Star 1100 online that actually had a section describing where that little piece went. So my initial thought of leaving it with the concave side up was correct. However, where I was placing it was incorrect. That piece is actually supposed to sit in the hole under the main jet, rather than on the other end inside of the Venturi tunnel of the carburetors. By putting it inside the Venturi tunnel, even if you had it the right way up, it would pull up and release way too much fuel, flooding the whole system. If you flipped it upside down and still had it in the Venturi tunnel, it would block too much fuel and it would run way too lean, and it would die essentially when you give it throttle. But now that I actually installed it properly under the main jet with the concave side up, the bike runs perfectly. It idles, it starts without choke, and it has power on the way with wide open throttle. So it's finally ready for the road. I'm just gonna put the mirrors back on it so I have some visibility and take it out for a ride. All right guys, just test rode the bike. It runs beautifully. Make sure to subscribe, hit the little bell for notifications when new videos become available. Check me out on Instagram at Balkan Moto 2018 and check out balkanmoto.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.